From the real estate, interior design, and design and build experts at the Penzo Group comes a podcast that covers all things home. For our team, a home is so much more than the sum of its four walls. It goes beyond. A home is our sanctuary, a place to create memories, build routines, and shape our futures. Through a series of captivating conversations with guests who are industry experts in their fields, we discuss their lives, passions, and their most personal and intimate spaces, their homes. Welcome to Beyond Four Walls, where we explore the soul of living spaces and celebrate the essence of what makes a house a true home. Okay, hello, welcome back to Beyond Four Walls. Today we have a really exciting topic, education. I'm Natasha, and today I'm joined by Jessica Diamond, founder of Diamond Education Consulting. She has over 16 years of experience in the public school system, and now she has her own business helping families navigate the often overwhelming world of education, advocating for each child's unique learning needs and assisting parents like myself in making informed, confident choices. Welcome, Jess.
What an intro. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here. It is so lovely to sit with you and to be invited. And I, client love, which is just the best. So thank you so much. I'm so honored. And I'm such a fan of the podcast. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So you spent 16 years in the public school system before launching Diamond Education Consulting. Can you tell us a bit about your experience? What was like the impetus for starting your own consulting business and how you took the leap to do that?
Yeah, of course. So, it didn't happen overnight. I had a really great experience in the public system. I learned so much from colleagues, from, administration and how it all works. But I think the biggest thing that I took away was just how students learn.
And you were navigating.
A teacher. Yeah, I was a teacher, exactly. And navigating, variety of learners and also meeting with families. Mm-hmm. So I took away so much from that experience. And the biggest thing that I found, which is why I started my consulting business, is that there were so many gaps and families came to be so lost, especially the last 10 years. I just found like there was so much information and so many gaps, and families were like, I'm not really sure what to do next within the system itself. Mm-hmm. So just helping them fill in the gaps and giving them the confidence to honestly steer through the system is why I started. And I absolutely love it. It's my passion in life to find every student the right fit and to work with every child to find like what their unique needs are and therefore place them appropriately. And that's not just, private independent, that's also public schools and navigating the public system.
Speaking of, children's individual, needs and unique, the way they learn, how at your business do you go about identifying those unique needs?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a process that I take, of course, and each child, I think, is a mosaic within themselves. And every family is a different mosaic, but the child uniquely is a mosaic within him or herself. So I often will start with meeting with the families. Listening is such a big part of the start of my, relationship with a family and creating that trust and creating that relationship, listening to their current strengths, challenges, what's working, what's not in their day-to-day lives and school, right? And then on top of that, learning what the student is interested in. So whether it's specific sports or, different math programs or variety of different things. And then taking all that information in conjunction with their report card. So reading, if there are any patterns that develop over the years through their report cards. Some students also have learning challenges that have been identified. So reading their psych reports. Some students are on an individual education plan. There's a lot here. An individual education plan. So I also read through that and kind of look for patterns in order to best kind of, meet the need of each student. And again, if depending on the age of the child, I also am very willing to meet with the student because they have something to say about their own educational journey, right? So I think it's important to meet with the family, but also the student, him or herself.
Yeah, and I think you can speak to this so much more than I can, but with COVID, I know with our eldest, he was, in his formative kind of years during COVID, like where he was learning to read. And then we got to grade 1 and he was super behind. And I was like, do we push the extra tutoring? Like, it's so overwhelming to navigate. Like, is everyone doing, spirit of math? Like, you kind of start to follow the crowd a little bit. And like you said, that might not always be the right approach. Like, everyone's doing Kumon, so let's do Kumon. So
I think the first thing is just, the confidence that you're not alone. Of course, especially since COVID, there are gaps, and kind of learning where the gaps are and how to fill them appropriately. So just getting a tutor and saying like, oh, you know what, I'm just going to get my son a tutor once a week. That doesn't necessarily fill the gap, right? Like, they might need a more intensive reading program if they have reading challenges. They might need an OT to work on their writing challenges. They might need, specific math programming like Kumon that, really fires in and hones in on the basics. So it really depends on where the gap is. And then we work my best to fill it.
What are some of the misconceptions that parents, families have when they come to you? Like, I know we talked about, my father went here, so there's like the legacy aspect of, where you think your kid fits in, and schools have changed so much, right? Like, I went to
the systems changed. Everything's changed since we were all at school.
Yeah, so you can't really assume.
I think the biggest misconception is one size fits all. And families will come to me often, so you're not unique, to just say, oh, my grandfather and great grandfather went to this school, so can you get me in? So firstly, no, I can't get you into a school. You're doing the legwork, not me. And it has to be a really good fit both ways, on the school side, but as well as the family. Like, is it truly a school that your family will fit into? So that comes around, that entails school values. Does that fit in with your family values? On top of that, is the curriculum going to be appropriate for your child? So is an intense curriculum appropriate, or is it a program that's maybe more hands-on appropriate? So I think, everyone just thinking one size fits all, and I want to get my kid into the best, or what they deem the best school in the city, is the biggest misconception. And I think one of the things that I pride myself on is I'm really honest. And
yeah, I love that when we did our consult, it was like, you just said it like it is.
And I'm not going to say, yeah, of course you're going to get into this school. If I don't feel that, then I'll share that. But I mostly will share that I'm not sure if it's the right fit. You're welcome to apply, but here are the reasons why I might not think it's the right fit. And these are some other schools that I think you should consider. So I think,
and there is that sort of like, you get, you hear in your community, or, all my son's friends right now are going to RSGC, and, that might not be the right fit for Jack. But just giving myself as an example is like, it's so hard to navigate. Like, do you start early? Like, when's the right time? Like, financially, when's the right time for your family, right?
I mean, these schools are very expensive.
Yeah.
So in order to make a jump or that choice, you have to be certain. And I think, there are so many schools, personally not enough, but there are many schools to choose from in the city. RSGC is a great school, as is the competitors, but not all kids can attend RSGC. And even from their standpoint, I mean, every school only takes in a certain amount of students to maintain a small class size, which is what makes like part of the beauty of independent schools and part of what you're paying for. So I think, looking around, having that intel to know that this school might be a better fit for us, and then leading with confidence to move on to the application process. So I think the first thing is providing information and answering questions. And then the second phase would be providing you with the confidence to feel good about where you're walking into and what decisions you want to make going forward.
Say you're starting to tour the independent schools. What are the key entry years? Like, there's
really dependent on the school in the city, which like it's a bit of a all over the place, but roughly kindergarten, there's often, JK or SK depending on the school, often a grade 1 entry year, sometimes like a grade 3, 4, 5 entry, and then all the schools have a grade 7 and grade 9 entry.
And as is it much harder in grade 7 and grade 9?
The older you get, the greater the competition, I'd say, because the demands are greater. The academics get a bit more challenging. So I would say, yeah, it does get more competitive the older you get. Now, that's not to say that I ask and, suggest to clients to jump ship earlier if that's where they choose to go. I actually think going to different schools sometimes actually really helps your development as you grow. I think one school from kindergarten to grade 12 is great for some kids. It's not always great for others. So being open to, I guess, changing at various grades is okay also, and exploring it at different grades. So I'm not one that's going to say you must apply for grade 5 or you must apply for grade 1. I think it really depends on the family, financial situation, but also, is change important, and do you want to watch them grow and develop through the years and then make an educated choice later on once you know them as learners?
Yeah, no, forward. I think that's so important. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think as, you know, children develop, like also learning grit and resilience is super important, and you know, change is inevitable in life. So,
and the grass is not always greener.
No,
I think that's another misconception. I think often, you know, I'll have clients come to me and say, well, my school is terrible and I'm ready to change. I'm like, well, what's terrible about it? Like, if they're not meeting the needs of your student and child, then absolutely, it's time to talk about other options. But what's really terrible about it? And, you know, there's so many things that come into play when it comes to schools. Like cohort is a big one. And so underrated. Like, who is your student mingling with, and who are they going to be mingling with? And, you know, that's often out of our control. So can develop skills like grit, like resilience, which is actually a good thing and gives them really, you know, important skills to manage the big life and beyond the four walls later on.
And like who the principal is, and all these things come into play, right? Like,
everything matters.
Everything matters. Who, you know, the parent body is. Everything matters.
And again, if that matters to you, like some families really care about who the administration is and how they're guiding and leading the school. Other families don't. They care more so about the teacher and that nucleus of that cohort. Other families want a really involved parent community and they're looking for that, you know, connection to community. Other families come to me and say, you know what? I actually don't have time to engage. I'd love a school that just does it all and, you know, is a one-stop shop. And I get that too. Like, I think there's balances for everything and everyone.
We're looking, you know, for grade 7 or open to making the switch a little earlier. Been at public school from JK onwards. When do you recommend starting to kind of look and tour? Like, what's the max amount of schools to tour? Because like,
great questions. And valid, and I answer these questions every day. I think probably starting the process in the spring before the application year. So if you'd like to apply, let's say for grade 4, I'd start actually this spring in grade 2, just kind of wondering and probably contacting someone like myself to get some information and to understand what's available. And then come grade 3 for the fall, start your application process. So that entails going on a school tour. Very important to walk through a school, not just, you know, reading what it's about online or listening to friends and neighbors. Yes, that's a part of it. But I think walking through the door really gives you so much knowledge and information and feeling warmth, if that's important, and feeling the day-to-day life. So touring the school in the fall is super important. And then the application process starts in the fall. So often applications in the private independent school are due December 1st. So we'd start our relationship probably in the spring or fall. And I think the other thing to note is that, you know, if you're a family who's like, oh, I missed the spring, I missed the whole thing, I'm screwed. You're not. Like, we can still have conversations starting in the fall. And yes, you know, most applications are due December 1st, as I mentioned, but there are other schools who have enrolling admissions, and it's okay too to start that process in the spring of that current year for the previous year. So it really depends on the school, but let's start our conversations early when it's on your radar and develop that relationship.
Okay. And then the students they have to write a test, like
the admissions process.
The admissions. And I know you work with your clients. Like, I just can't even picture our kids like interview prep. Like, feels like so formal, right?
The biggest thing is to be yourself.
Okay.
I you know what? I can work with you from, you know, here to June, and, you know, or like the following June, more than over a year. And, you know, that kid will still say whatever they want. So part of it is just you show up and be who you are. I absolutely can help refine and work on some answers that are not just one word answers. Because often, you know, you'll hear kids say, what sport do you like? And the answer is hockey. And that's a very common conversation that I have with my clients, but we work on reasons why you love hockey. And kids have so much to say when they're probed, also appropriately from the admissions staff, right? Like their job is to get to know your family and get to know their kids. So they're going to probe a little bit more, but just giving the family and that student the confidence to speak about themselves is what I really like. That's my bread and butter. And I love working with the kids. Assessment prep is not something I do, but I do refer out to a third party that I think does a great job. The other, all schools
what are
kind
some
of have
examples of the interview questions? You said like, what's your favorite sport? What would some other questions?
The biggest question is, why do you want to come to this school?
Right. Most important
And
one.
it's so obvious, but I find that parents don't always think about that. It's like, well, you're
and are you in
to,
the room with your child, or do they go in on their own?
Depends on the age.
Okay.
Sometimes I actually think it's better to do it alone if the kids are up for it. Just to, I think kids are better off without like their parents breathing down
they get
their
so
neck.
Nervous.
Yeah. And just having a casual conversation. But truly the best question, and the one that I prep for, and the one that they should know the answer to, is, why do you want to come to this school? Why this school and why not the other school? And then, counter to that, I think the parents need to understand also, like, why should we choose your school? I think it has to be a puzzle that fits. So it goes two ways. It should work for us as the school, and it should work for you as the family.
Right.
And I think that's a really important relationship that starts in the admissions process. But all assessments are really different at all the schools. Like, you do have to write an assessment at different schools to get into that school. Some schools have created a partnership where you write one test for 3 schools, but otherwise it's one test per school.
Okay.
And that really is just, age and grade appropriate curriculum that they'll ask. So often reading, writing, and math skills that are appropriate to that age and level.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so they weight it like the report card, it's the assessment, and then it's the interview. What about athletics? Depends on the school.
Everything that makes your kid who they are is important. So if you come to me and say, oh, my child does not play the violin, like, I'm going to sign them up for the violin. No, we're not going to sign him up for the violin. No. Like, if he has no interest in the violin, why would you do that? Right. So I think just displaying and really being upfront and honest about what your child is interested in is what really helps guide the admissions process. So don't catch up and try to do things just because. Right. But if they're into a sport, then lean into that. Or if they're into a music lesson, then definitely lean into it for their own growth and development, not just for the administration process. Right. I think that's important.
Yeah, there's so much to think about. I mean, even just like co-ed versus same sex, and like, our son is going to an all boys camp, and it's hard to know if you're making the right choice. And I think, going into the school and touring is like the most important thing.
And you're not always going to make the right choice. Right. And I think that's okay too. Like trying a school, and that's an expensive try, but trying to see if the shoe fits for a year or two is okay also. And then realizing, this actually isn't working for us. I think that's okay. And exploring other schools, like that change piece. Like, if it's not working for your child, then we need to explore why and maybe move on to other options.
Well, I did private until grade 9 and then went to public.
Yep.
Which was a big change for me. As a real estate team, we often get, asked about Cottingham. And I'm so grateful that we have access living in this neighborhood to such a great community school with small classes, just like such nurturing teachers, an amazing principal. So I often wonder, like, is private school better? Like,
no. No, not always. Yeah. Cottingham's a great example of that, and a great school. But, it again, like, not all schools fit every child. And I think some of the larger classes in public school settings actually work really well for certain students. Not everyone needs an individualized program within their school. That's great. I think, supporting your community school, that there's really something special to that, and supporting the families around you, that's such a special relationship. And the teachers are, you get to know the teachers that work in your community. Like, how wonderful is that? I also feel like students who attend public school have such great free access to specialties like social workers, like a teacher who, specializes in special education, and often a teacher who specializes in English as a second language. So those resources are available to those students. I think where I come in and can support a family who attends public school is navigating that and advocating for these students. Because not all families, like, I don't know if you knew that, but your child could have access to a social worker should you need one.
We knew, yeah.
So, not all families know that. So
Yeah.
just supporting families and what's available to them within their school system is so important, and giving them that information so that they can be confident to move on and advocate for themselves, right? I mean, also when you're in a class of, let's say, 30 plus, you need to advocate for yourself and you need to advocate for your child. So learning what's available is such a big part of it. I would say private and independent are not always the right call.
Yeah, like for me personally, going to public before university actually was so beneficial because I came from an all-girls school. And then I had to, going into high school, I had to pick my outfit. And I was around, different gender.
Yeah.
And then going off to university, I feel like it really prepared me in a way that I may not have been otherwise. So I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's great. I don't think all girls or all boys or single gender is right for everyone. I think it is great for certain kids and they really grow and develop. And I think the program of single gender schooling is strong. Like those schools know how to best educate that gender for those boys or girls who attend that school. There are many other children who do not fit that bill who are much better off in a co-ed environment for a variety of different reasons. And being around, the opposite gender in your case and, wearing whatever you wanted, like that maybe gave you the confidence and independence to move on to your post-secondary. So I think that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think it really is dependent on the kid. And, I just want to mention one more thing about public schools. I think even if you have all the funds and can't afford the schools, doesn't mean you should do it. I think that there are families who, should stay in the public system because it's working for their kids. And, working within the community and, raising their children together. Like, that whole saying, it takes a village. And if you find that within your community, there's no amount of money that's going to create that for you.
I think you're right. That makes sense. Because I get emotional thinking about post Cottingham because it's such a community driven school. Like in the morning, the kids look out the window and they're excited to walk to school with their friends. Like that's really special.
Absolutely.
And
it's also age and stage, right? So kids who are younger, the data is that families tend to be more involved the younger the kids are. But that's not to say that you can't be more involved as they get older. It just, parents drop off a little bit on parent associations in high school. But, having that beautiful community at a young age also makes sure they have those relationships and they can continue those relationships whether they move on to different schools or not. Like that's so lovely that they have community relationships.
So what is an educational consultant and what would be a reason a family would get in touch with one?
That's a great question. I think that the relationship with me starts, and what I pride myself in is getting to know the families first and creating that relationship and that trust. Moving on from that, it's really understanding what is going on. So why you would contact me is likely there's a challenge in the school or outside of school or in the cohort. So academically, socially, emotionally, and how I can be of help to that. So I can either support the family by advocating for them and helping them advocate for themselves within their current system, within their administration. Or we can look into exploring other schools that might be a better fit and better for their, child's learning needs. I also help families find programming that would benefit their learning. So let's say they're enrolled in a school and their math scores are a bit lower and they really want to work on bumping those up. I can help families find a better program for them that would do that and focus in on what their need is. So just finding a tutor or just finding a math program, I don't think is the answer. I think it's finding the right math program and the right tutor to really fill in those gaps. Also advocating within a school system to help families create an IEP. So often when families come to me, their students or their child might be having behavioral challenges and or academic challenges. Sometimes those go hand in hand, sometimes they don't. But, developing an individual education plan with the family and with the teacher and the administration is a great, start in setting that student up for success within the class.
I think that's so valuable because not necessarily having to make such a big decision as to, we need to change schools, but say, okay, my child just, maybe they need a little bit more time. And how can we work with, the teachers and the administration and the occupational therapy or whatever it is within the public school system where, for this phase of the math program, my child just needs a little bit more time than what the average student in the class is needing.
Absolutely.
And that happened to us. And our child got to where he needed to be. It took a few more months.
Yeah, of course. And often both parents are working, right, in a family. So learning and knowing all this information is overwhelming. And also just, there are people like me who specialize in this. So hiring me will kind of give you the guidance and the confidence to move forward and take the next necessary step. In conjunction to that.
Well, and I think it's so nice because you're such a neutral party. Like you have so much integrity. And as a parent, sometimes you just end up talking to other parents, and none of us,
that's a good one.
None of us are experts in this. We really don't know anything about it. So being able to confide in you and trust you just gives so much value and a sense of calm where you can get very flustered by sort of engaging with other parents whose kids have very different needs than your own.
Yeah, that exactly. And thank you. And I'm so glad that you feel that with me, and likewise. But it is really like a lot of my job is, being a bit of a therapist and calming parents down and just saying you're not alone and it's okay and your kids are going to be okay. Because I truly often I feel that if I say that. Yeah. But I think, you're not going to go to your, local store and ask for therapy. Like you're going to instill a professional, right? Yeah. And, getting advice and speaking to your friends and your neighbors is great. And there's definitely a place on that with that, but not everyone knows the profile of your child. You know your child best, and then hiring a professional to then work through that with you for next steps, I think is really valuable.
Well, this was so much fun. Thank you,
great time.
Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for our listeners, where can they find you?
diamondec.ca is my website, or you can email me at jessica@diamondec.ca.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Great. And thanks for having me. I will just add that I think a school should be an extension of the home. And that's so important to feel all the same feels at a school that you feel within your home. So I think that blends nicely to your whole mantra of your podcast.
Yeah.
Beyond four walls.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.